At last the glorious evolution shall commence. All augmentations at 100% efficiency.
With Viktor finally getting his long-deserved rework, a lot of people are going to be jumping in to try out the Machine Herald. This video is going to cover some of the main changes, as well as providing insights into ways you can use him to carry yourself. Before we can talk about the new Viktor though, we need to address why he needed a rework in the first place. A lot of people seem to be under the impression that the old Viktor was not viable, or that it was lacking in damage. For those who have ever found themselves facing an experienced Viktor player though, you know that's simply incorrect. His first issue is that he was overbearing. If he managed to receive an early kill or two, his laning phase power spiked through the roof with an early death augment upgrade. This allowed him to have an easy 140 or even more AP by level 6. This strength made the lane very frustrating to try and fight, just due to him having so many more stats than other heroes. His second issue is that he was unreliable. While he had insane amounts of free stats and crazy potential damage, this was mitigated by how hard it was to execute most of those ideal combos, and how reliant you always were on your opponents to misplay or to be caught out of position. A weirdly long cast time on his ultimate, no true escape abilities, a buggy hitbox on his laser, as well as a number of other issues made it so that people felt that they just weren't being rewarded for the effort that they put into learning the character. Finally, he was just straight up outclassed by most other mages. He had high cast times, long cooldowns, mismatched ranges, weird mana costs, and quality of life issues that just made it so that people weren't really getting rewarded. At the end of the day, you were so forced into a niche build and playstyle in order to truly be successful that it just wasn't worth it at that point. Now, before the secret Viktor army shows up in my house, I want to clarify that I played Viktor through that entire time, and he was not weak. But he did have undeniable issues and problems keeping him from seeing more play. Overall, I'm quite impressed with how Riot's handled the main issues that he had in the rework, and I'm really excited to see how things go over. Or at least I'm excited until Riot inevitably nerfs him into the ground when people start complaining that, oh my god, Viktor deals damage. What I'd like to do is go over what his new kit consists of, and then we'll try and address why these things have been changed and why it really matters. With his new passive, Viktor starts the game with an unsellable Hex Core. This item gives Viktor bonus AP every time he levels up, and can be upgraded through the shop in order to gain bonus stats, as well as augmenting his basic abilities with extra effects. On his Q, Siphon Power shields Viktor while damaging his target for a small amount. Viktor's next auto attack is Empowered, and deals bonus magic damage. It's worth noting that the auto attack's base damage is based on Viktor's level, and not the rank of his Q. Once augmented, Viktor gains a 30% move speed buff for 2.5 seconds every time he casts Siphon Power. At max rank, with cooldown reduction, this buff can be maintained permanently. On his W, which is Gravity Field, Viktor places a field on the ground which slows all enemies traveling through it. If they stay inside the field for at least 1.5 seconds, they are stunned for 1.5 seconds. Once augmented, all stunned targets are dragged to the center of the gravity field for easy target practice. His E is Death Ray, which fires a skill shot nuke in a straight line, dealing damage to all enemies hit. This uses vector targeting sort of like Rumble's ult, and does not interrupt movement. This means you can use it while running or chasing with no penalty. Once augmented, a second round of burst damage follows the laser, dealing secondary damage. Targets that are hit by both blasts take reduced damage. On his R, Viktor summons a large storm at the target location, which interrupts channeled abilities, deals a large amount of burst damage, and then continues to deal damage over time to enemies within its range. Chaos Storm moves faster the closer it is to Viktor, and slower when it's further away from him. It always moves its full speed when it's returning to him. Once augmented, Chaos Storm moves 20% faster. I place 1 point in my Q at level 1 to ensure safe trades in lane. I then proceed to max my E first, taking a point in W at level 4 for safety. Maxing Q is not generally a good decision because the bulk of its damage, the on-hit effect, is based on Viktor's level and not the level of the skill itself. As soon as I can afford it, I try and pick up my E augment. This makes it near impossible to be shut down due to the immense wave clear it gives. Even if I'm outclassed or if I'm camped, I can push out the lane and pick up jungle camps or roam to help my team once I have this item. Everyone has their own preferences in terms of when you buy your second and third augment, but I like to leave it as a third or fourth item in most cases. If you're top lane, augmenting Q first can be a strong choice, but it does not increase the skill's damage, and as a result, it's only really good if you're chasing or running from fights after quick trades. W augment is incredibly powerful in terms of teamfight utility and to counter enemy dives, but is not usually worth rushing just due to its minimalistic effect in lane. With the improved reliability of his new kit, Viktor is a fantastic champion with a large number of viable gameplay styles. Before we go into each style in depth though, let's get a general idea of what each one accomplishes so that you can gear yourself towards what works for you. Before his rework, Burst Mage Viktor was often seen as the only viable build. While that statement is definitely no longer true, this build is every bit as strong as it was before and offers some nice new bonuses. This playstyle is something similar to what you would use on a utility mage like Lux or Orianna, and focuses on ability power, cooldown reduction, and magic penetration to constantly poke down opponents. By overlapping his skills on grouped or priority targets, he provides devastating area of effect burst while still having good utility and safety from his shield, movement speed, and massively improved gravity field. Making top lane or bruiser Viktor more viable was one of the main goals of his rework, and I would argue Riot has done a very good job of it. By focusing on an early Q augment, as well as items like Rylai's, Hourglass, or even a Rod of Ages, Bruiser Viktor is able to constantly reposition in teamfights while outputting large amounts of sustained damage in close range. Builds vary greatly and can sometimes take a while to truly scale up, but it's quite easy to feel like an unkillable robot god if you find yourself ahead during the mid-game on Bruiser Viktor. One thing to look out for though is to make sure that you have enough cooldown reduction as well as mana regen so that you don't find yourself caught out with no backup and no skills to aid you. While not a completely accurate description, Assassin Viktor is how I would describe any Lichbane center build for him. With the synergy of his Q, Lichbane provides spiky burst damage that many assassins can only dream of. This playstyle lands somewhere in between that of Bruiser and Burst Mage Viktor simply due to how close you're going to find yourself when you try and use that Lichbane empowered auto attack. If your team comp has enough lockdown, or you're good enough at positioning, you can be highly rewarded for taking the risks. Keep in mind though that you are restricted to 5 item slots on Viktor, and picking up Lichbane often means you're giving up something that Burst Mage Viktor would normally want. Plan accordingly and try and find the items that synergize best with your playstyle. For starting items, Viktor will want a Doran's Ring, 2 health potions, and a warding totem. In certain situations, such as those versus heavy harass champions, Flask is often a good choice. Now, I personally don't think that Flask is as good as Doran's because it reduces your early kill potential. In terms of core items, I would say Hourglass, Void Staff, and of course your Hex Core are going to be needed in almost any build you want to go for. My reasoning being is that Hourglass protects you from enemies diving on top of yourself, and is pretty much core on every champion that builds AP and goes mid lane, and then of course Void Staff countering any magic resist the enemy team will build. In my standard Mage Viktor build, I'll be going Source Boots, Athenes, and Deathcap as my 3 optional items, although in very few circumstances I would avoid building Unholy Grail and instead go Morellonomicon, such as when versus a heavy healing team such as a Soraka or a Mundo. With Bruiser Viktor, you have so many different items that you may want, such as Crystal Scepter and Liandry's Torment to synergize with each other. And in terms of boots, you could either go cooldown reduction boots or Source Shoes. Rod of Ages and Iceborne Gauntlet can also be decent options, although Iceborne Gauntlet is more of a gimmick than anything else. For Assassin Viktor, oftentimes you will skip buying boots entirely and instead go for Lichbane, Deathcap, and Twin Shadows as your 3 optional items, relying on the movement speed from Twin Shadows, Lichbane, Runes, Masteries, and of course your Q augmentation. For runes, I have a couple different pages that I tend to switch between. If I'm going mid lane, especially versus someone who's mostly dealing magic damage, I'll go for Magic Penetration Reds, Health per level Yellows, and then a mix of cooldown per level and AP per level Blues. I take just enough cooldown per level Blues to give me 5.01% cooldown reduction at level 18. Combined with your Masteries, this puts you right at 10%, and then the rest gives you offensive strength. You then pair that up with ability power quintessences in order to have the strongest early and mid game as possible. Now, the reason I no longer run hybrid penetrations for mid lane is because your Q converts your next auto attack entirely to magic damage. This makes the early armor penetration much less of an issue. If I was going top lane, I generally will still run that hybrid penetration due to the increased amount of auto attack harass I plan to do, and then I mix that with armor yellows, magic resist blues, or AP per level blues if I'm versus an entirely physical damage opponent, and then AP quints. For masteries, I run the standard 2109. Currently, I am focusing my extra points on movement speed rather than mana regen, but that is personal preference. To help jumpstart your gameplay, here's some combos and tips to help out. The shield and movement speed from Viktor's Q is applied instantly when he casts it. Using it on a minion to block incoming damage, or to help catch up for an empowered auto attack can be incredibly powerful. Viktor's ultimate still deals damage when he's in Hourglass or even after he's died. If your team has significant lockdown, you can win fights incredibly easy through your ultimate and Hourglass baits. Once augmented, Viktor's E clears waves of minions in a single shot. Abuse this pressure to take jungle camps, zone, or to simply roam and help your allies. In the late game, you can use this to stall out matches that should long be over and help get your team back into the match. Jungle skirmishes and objective fights are a buffet for Viktor. Cutting off the enemy team's approach or retreat with your W, and then simply using your combo is going to rack up kill after kill after kill. Make sure your team is aware of your strengths and weaknesses, so you can set up these type of plays with proper ward coverage and map awareness. Hopefully you've enjoyed this brief overview of the Viktor rework. If you enjoy our content, please subscribe to our YouTube page or follow us on Twitch. We stream full-time and are happy to answer any questions during our live stream or in the comments below.